Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's University Businesses web seminar entitled Finding Opportunity in Adversity, Lighting the Path for Community College Students, brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor, Anthology. Before we get underway, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. For technical support, please use the chat panel on the right side of your screen. Select on my name, Stephen Blackburn, and type your message if you're having any technical issues. If you don't have computer speakers or if you prefer to listen privately, please dial the phone number and access code that I will post in the chat window in a few moments. We will also be welcoming any questions you have today with a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To submit a question, please use the Q&A panel at the bottom right side of your screen and send your questions to all panelists, which is the default option. If you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, please click the expand triangle button in front of the panel name to make sure you have access to it. Also, something important to note, if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, everyone who registered and who is attending today will receive an email with a link to the slide and an archive recording. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you all to one of our panelists today, Dr. J.D. White, who is the Chief Product Officer at Anthology. Hey, J.D., great to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's great to be here. And I am excited to be joining today. And 2020 has definitely been a challenging year for most of us. And the effects of this pandemic have definitely impacted higher education and specifically community colleges. And very pleased to be joining this esteemed panel today with three community college presidents: Dr. Mark Escamilla, president of Del Mar College; Dr. Jackie Elliott, president of Central Arizona College; and Dr. Keith Miller, president of Greenville Technical College. In our discussion today, we will really be focusing around how community colleges are adapting their programs and services to today's new reality. I just kind of wanted to welcome each of you to the panel and the discussion today. And maybe we can start off by you introducing yourself and maybe telling us briefly kind of what the current situation is on your campuses as far as how you're kind of managing in today's climate. And Dr. Elliott, why don't we start with you?
Okay, good morning. I'm trying to start my video here. There we go. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with this esteemed panel and share our thoughts, in particular in this day and age amid COVID. The current situation at Central Arizona College is we are probably about 90% virtual, and we're using the word virtual instead of online or remote because we are using Blackboard Collaborate, where it's much like Zoom, and where our faculty are interacting with the students face-to-face, albeit in a virtual format. The other hands-on career technical education is happening on our campus in very small groups in highly structured schedules where a few students and faculty are on campus at any given time, of course, following all the CDC guidelines with PPE and social distancing as much as possible. So obviously it's been quite a challenge, logistical nightmare as far as trying to schedule students to ensure that they have their hands-on learning experiences and that they're meaningful, but also keeping everyone safe. We also made the decision not to open our residence halls this fall. We only house probably about 140 students. Most of them are athletes. And since we moved all athletic practices and competitions to the spring, we made that decision not to open the residence hall. So obviously campus looks very different. Majority of our employees are still working remotely with a plan to implement phase 1 of return to campus October 5th. So that's kind of where Central Arizona College is right now.
Well, good luck as you start to prepare for phase 1's reopening. Dr. Miller, how are things at Greenville Technical College? Oh, I think Dr. Miller, you may still be on mute.
There we go. Got the video, forgot to mute. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to participate. You know, very similar to what Jackie indicated, our numbers are a little bit different though. The vast majority of our employees are back on campus. Only those with some extenuating circumstances are still operating remotely. But in terms of our courses, to the extent that we could, we tried to offer 3 different options to all the students, meaning face-to-face, virtual, and hybrid. So the way that mixture looks right now are 10% of the courses are face-to-face, about 50% are virtual, and about 40% are hybrid. And the interesting statistic is majority of students are choosing the hybrid option, because I think that gives them a combination of flexibility plus that occasional discipline, you might say, that's needed when you have that faculty member right in front of you. So it actually has worked out very well. I've made masks mandatory, and of course we monitor the COVID situation very, very closely. The labs and so on that cannot be done virtual. Similar to what Jackie indicated, we continue with those, but we divide the students up and, of course, heavily disinfect in between the small groups of students that come in. So I'm pleased with the way things have rolled out and continue to work.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Miller. And Dr. Escamilla, how about at Del Mar?
So, good afternoon, everyone. So it's very similar. It's kind of a combination of both Drs. Miller and Elliott's statements. Here at Del Mar College, we're up to 12,000 credit students at any given semester, is what we were actually expecting this semester. And but we were hit extremely hard. Our community was hit extremely hard by COVID, and as such, there's been some profound effects that we were not anticipating here in our community. Here we're going into fall expecting somewhere close to about 12,000 head count for fall, and we're actually around the 10,500 range after some drops and other things. That being said, we're recovering and we're putting in place a series. I think we're up to 160 or so sections of second 8 weeks classes that are filling up nicely right now, and that has to do with the effects of everything going on here in the community. You know, we still have many parents at who are students. What we're hearing from our parents are that we have many parents out there who are, you know, obviously parents with kids of their own that are still at home, and it's precluding their opportunity, prohibiting them from taking on their own priorities with education, and so forth. As a result, they're having to hold back because they have enough with their hands. They have a handful with their own children in school, and having to provide for their needs. And so we're thinking that that's kind of something we have to overcome, and we're working on that, and the evidence is showing that is the case. Again, we have about 160 sections, and they're filling up. I think the last check that I did was about a little over 60% filling all those already. If you think of that on an average of 20 to 30, depending on the nature of the class, that's a significant number that aren't enrolled that will be. So we're standing by there. You know, generally speaking, we're about 60% online or some form of virtual or remote teaching. All the nomenclature out there, we are all using them interchangeably and differently, I would add. But if we're going to use the term virtual, there's about 60%, and we have about 40% who are still attending class. You know, we're a heavy industry. We have a huge industrial base here that we serve. And as such, we have big technical programs and so forth that serve many refineries and the military Army depot and other big industrial bases that we have here. When you have a combination of of a dozen or so major refineries, and more still coming on board, and the largest helicopter repair facility in the world here in Corpus Christi. It makes for a big industrial base, and so it requires for those skills-based hands-on classes to proceed. As such, we have anywhere about 4,000 to 5,000 students who are still intermittently coming in and distancing and with their PPE and everything else, coming to our classes and taking on the skills-based instruction that they need. Lots of welding, lots of process technology, instrumentation, those kinds of things. And that's not to exclude the chemistries and all those others that are still proceeding with their skills in their lab classes. That's the upshot of what's going on here at Del Mar College in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Well, that's good to hear about the kind of current progress related to the fill rates on the next 8-week sessions and kind of the start of trying to close that gap of enrollment. The three of you as senior leaders of your institution and really helping to kind of guide in extremely uncertain times, from your perspectives, what is at the top of your minds now that maybe wasn't there a year ago? And the more important question here is, what issues did those things that you're thinking about today replace? And what's kind of fallen off in the current climate? Dr. Miller, do you want to start?
Sure. I can't say that there's something at the top of my mind now that wasn't there last year. I mean, of course, health and safety of employees and students has always been there. That of course has intensified. So what it isn't so much something new that's at top of my mind, but stuff that has been there that has moved to the top. And the specific example is student engagement. I mean, that's always been an important issue too. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But I think this pandemic environment and now this virtual environment has moved that to the top of the list in many ways, as being even more crucial now than it was previously.
Well, that's interesting to kind of see how that balance has maybe intensified, to your point, as opposed to kind of replacing. It's just gained a different or greater intensity. Dr. Elliott, how about you? How have your priorities or how have the issues at the top of your list continued their intensity?
I think for us, looking at our student experience from the lens of equity, my biggest concern is the equity gap is going to get much larger than it already was. We're a predominantly Hispanic serving institution, and one of the things that we know is that our students relied on us for technology. And while we got the CARES dollars and we were able to put funds in students' hands, what we learned is many students went and bought maybe a Chromebook or if they weren't able to get a laptop from us. And then I just recently learned that our testing software, our proctoring software, Respondus, does not work with a Chromebook. And so now we have students with technology. We thought we were doing the right thing, putting technology in their hand, but we really didn't think about the overall implications of just getting it in the student's hand doesn't mean that they're going to have all the tools and the resources they need to be successful. Our enrollment is down 23%, and I disaggregated the data, and it is disproportional of our underrepresented and underserved, under-resourced students did not return this fall or dropped out. And we're in the process of surveying them to find out what was the reason. Was it financial? Was it the inability to learn online? Was it the technology? Because while we tried to pivot really quickly, we didn't always think about the ripple effect and the repercussions when we talk about the equity gap. And then my biggest concern is, okay, now we know there's an equity gap. It's happening right now during COVID. What is the ripple effect of that 2 and 3 years down the road? How are we going to get the students back? because we've lost them and they're just going to continue to fall behind. So that keeps me up at night, and I'm sure it does my colleagues as well.
Dr. Escamilla, how have your perspectives continued to shift? Similarly, it sounds like as you were talking about earlier, kind of an enrollment shift has happened, and that obviously was probably front and center for a while, but also the health and safety of students too.
All those things. Jackie could have taken that page right out of our book here at Del Mar College. That impact that I was referring to, that I actually started of the impact of COVID and how it frightened this community was extraordinary. I mean, we came out in the New York Times. Corpus Christi, Texas came out in the New York Times about the impact as one of the hot spots in the country. It was profound, and it has shaken this community greatly. And when you think about it, Jackie, I could break down the student data. It would be, we're an HSI as well, long-standing Title V HSI, and you could break down the numbers here. It would probably be, again, the same story. It would be, I think, eerily reflective of what you're experiencing there. I think also that impact, when we're talking about the breakdown of the people who are affected by COVID, who were literally infected or directly affected by the impact, they're the families of our students. And you can go and, I've been talking to the medical community here. Our community is about 70% Hispanic, and when you have the breakdowns of the individuals who are hospitalized and or worse, I happen to know that it was disproportionately this part of the community that are our students' families. And so as a result, there's both direct and indirect effects that we're still contending with. So your outlook to, beyond this year is something that we're grappling with at this moment to see. But so there's that psychology of this whole thing. It's absolutely unnerving to so many people. They're afraid to get out. They've been associated with hospitalizations and illness and so forth. We had over 20,000 infections in a town of 300,000 or 350,000, and all and primarily in one sector of the community. And you could even extrapolate the socioeconomic status out of that and say mid to low SES groups or disproportionately impacted. Well, those are the families we serve, and that's what we're doing is trying to recover both short term and long term. One quick thing, our IT, our ecosystem of technology, we've always bragged about, and we've always been proud about being at the forefront and doing more and doing things and staying in touch with UB and others out there and really proliferating technology because, like my colleagues have said, our students are looking for us to do that. And I think every one of the community colleges in the United States is grappling with that as well. But what we found was, as good as we thought we were, we still had a ways to go. And the gaps in the Chromebooks that are out there for all our dual credit students, we found, I had to make calls during the middle of a semester to allow testing to occur, unproctored testing, and I had to make big policy changes, and internal practices. We had to be changed just to accommodate those students, and we had to err on the side of the student, as we all do in colleges, very often, as is often the case. And as such, we found not only there, but in many other places where the gaps were. And I'll tell you, it's humbling.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Dr. Miller, both Dr. Elliott and Dr. Escamilla are talking about some of the items that they were facing in the short term and then kind of looking at the long term. How many, from your perspective, kind of the issues of today, how are they impacting your thinking about the future and how you're kind of projecting out there, or are we not that far enough along? Right? Is it too early to kind of be thinking about down the road and more focused on the immediacy?
Now, there's, given all of the negatives about the environment that we're in, the pandemic environment, there's things that I think we have probably all learned and that we will take forward. And one of those I mentioned is the interest of students in more of a robust hybrid environment. We will definitely take that one forward. But to do that, I also need some tools that will help me and help faculty better engage with students in and outside of the classroom. Even before the pandemic environment, the student surveys that we did showed very much that they don't want that engagement just on the front end, but it needs to be continuous and consistent throughout their entire career. And I think we've always known that, but carrying that out can be a bit of a challenge. So when I think about the future on a long-term basis, I need a tool, technology tool and otherwise, to make it extremely easy for students to engage on their own and take that initiative, and faculty and staff to engage them and keep them engaged. I see that as the absolute most critical thing moving forward. And when I think about workforce development, we are very heavily a manufacturing-based community. And I think a lot of the training that those industries were doing, that we were doing for them on site, of course, took a pause when the pandemic first started. But, that's picked up again because they've reestablished some of their supply chain. And they're all about manufacturing all the way at 100% tilt, you might say. So we're doing several things. We are back in there doing on site with the manufacturers, doing the face-to-face training with elements of virtual training kind of built in. So kind of the hybrid approach for the employers as well. And I see that going forward. I see that sticking, and I see them. I see the employers wanting to strengthen that hybrid approach for them as well.
Well, that's fascinating. Dr. Elliott, from your perspective, and Dr. Escamilla and Dr. Miller both were talking about kind of the kind of industry relationship and the kind of skill support and workforce development support that goes on there. How have you seen kind of the kind of skilling aspects of what you would provide at Central Arizona College impacted by our current state?
Well, obviously, it's been impacted, and we've tried to mitigate that impact as much as possible. One of our strategic goals is to grow apprenticeship programs at the college, and we had some really good momentum in that direction prior to COVID. So we've worked to keep those apprenticeships intact, to continue to grow on that. We also do know that our employers don't want to wait around for a student to be have the skills and be workforce ready in the traditional 15-week, 2-year program. So we've implemented some accelerated programs that were industry specific. For instance, we partnered with electrical company Wilson Electric, and in 8 weeks, students are ran through that program and able to enter as a journeyman. And so we see the need. The challenge is trying to keep faculty and staff safe, students safe, but also stay engaged with industry partners. And I think that has been particularly challenging during this time because they could not halt their work. And not that we halted our work, we were able to switch and move to virtual and virtual advising and providing students the services, but we really, in many instances, could not pivot and do that with business and industry, but we don't want to lose those partnerships because they're reliant on us. So I think that has been one of the most challenging things that we've come up across as a college, especially this fall, and being able to move forward with some of those programs. And obviously we did, but it did cause us a moment to pause. It has put us in a position where we feel it's hard to grow apprenticeship programs right now because of the COVID situation. And you know, one of the executive limitations that my board puts on me is to ensure the welfare of the college and the health and safety of all individuals. And so for me, I take it very personally. I don't want to be responsible for exposing somebody to this infectious disease because we weren't cautious. So that for me has been quite a challenge and a balance act, I think, to also meet business and industry needs, but yet keep safety in mind.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that there's so much of kind of that partnership and the balance that is happening. And Dr. Escamilla, you were talking a little bit about kind of the industry-specific areas around you and how that was impacting some of the kind of increase, I guess, in on-person types of training. How are you continuing to see the kind of future for the kind of partnerships and workforce development and skilling processes that'll be happening, given the current state of the economy?
Yeah, I think sometimes we act and we teach them, and sometimes we react and learn. And I think what the workforce part of the curriculum has really done is taught us what the nature of the beast is, to use the term. The industrial base doesn't stop. It continues to find ways around and through, over and more times than not through situations. So our curriculum is reflective of that. Has very much the DNA of this big industrial base that we serve. And so that, from the learning, from the standpoint of being the on this side of the curriculum, what those faculty have taught us was they're not going to stop. And really, for all intents and purposes, they never stopped. They were the ones that were least affected by this. They figured a way. Our workforce development programs, otherwise our technical programs, were the ones that kept going through this whole thing and found ways to overcome. And so that's just been the nature, and in a face-to-face environment. And they've had more face-to-face proportionally than any other aspect of the curriculum. And so they've taught us that they reflect the industry values. And it's like the medical community. You know, the nurses wanted to keep going, but for a few exceptions where clinicals weren't allowed and so forth, the nurses were like, no, this is what we do. We have to move forward. We have to continue serving and fulfilling. If we can't serve during a pandemic, then what are we doing here as nurses? You know, those are the things. So, and the same was that for process technology and all of our industrial programs. They're like, no, in the industrial world, this is not going to stop a refinery from running or being built, or a bridge from being built, and so forth. And those lessons learned are quite impressive. They don't stop. It's been a fascinating experience in that regard.
You know, one of the things that each of you kind of mentioned is what you've learned about kind of student behavior and kind of how it's impacting the academic offerings and the approach that you're taking to support that. You know, Dr. Elliott, you talked about this and kind of how you dug into the data about kind of student enrollments and behavioral patterns. You know, what else have you done with that data, and how have you used that to kind of continue to think about how you're evolving your support for students and their needs and the kind of academic demands from your institution?
Well, our student services team, they're pretty phenomenal. They started a call campaign, and where faculty and staff, anybody at the college, just calling students and checking on them and finding out what obstacles and barriers they're having. They also offered a free webinar just recently for students, and I was reading the comments today. But I think we have to I haven't done a whole lot with the data, but I think we have to take the data and disaggregate it and then find out what's really happening with our students. I read an article the other day about a young girl that had to drop out of college because her mother was pregnant and she had to go find a job because her mother lost her job during the pandemic. And so she couldn't be in school. She had to work and support her family. And I think that's probably a very significant trend at Central Arizona College, that many of our students are having to work and support their family. I got an email when this started from a young man that he reached out to me. He said, my home situation's horrible. I was planning on living in the residence hall. I have food insecurities. And people came together to help him. But these are things that we're learning that maybe we wouldn't learn otherwise, because students are often proud and they're not going to share with you what challenges they have. So I think we have to take all that information that our students are working and supporting their families. Some of our students are living in dire straits, and the residence hall is the only escape for them. We do know that we have homeless students. And so I think we have to look maybe not so much at the hard data, but also look at the qualitative stories and what is happening. Interestingly enough, a year ago, we embarked on a project where we sat down and interviewed our students, and we asked them what did they need and how was it going. And almost all of them talked about their relationship with the college, if they had trouble registering or if they couldn't get into an advisor. And we really didn't get that qualitative information that I don't think you can get from data. I think we have to hear the stories, and we have to dig in and understand what's really happening with our students and going on. I mean, it was the most heartbreaking email I received was from that young man, and then I continue to read these stories. I think intuitively we know our students are low-income first generation. We all know that. But then we don't know the other circumstances that may preclude their ability to be successful in college. And I think we have to get into some of the qualitative. And this is coming from someone who is the quantitative queen. I want the quant data, but I think especially now during this time, we have to get that qualitative data as well to help us understand how to better serve our students.
That's fascinating. Dr. Miller, how are you, as you were identifying kind of the potential rise of maybe more hybrid options, and to Dr. Elliott's point, kind of using various data sets, how are you all capturing data and thinking about how you might be adjusting your academic programs on that move forward basis as you were describing?
Certainly, several different ways. Most colleges use the typical nationally normed survey, which we do on a regular basis. But then we also implemented quarterly 2 to 3 question surveys of our students too, because the nationally normed survey we just do, I believe it's every 18 months or something like that. But we need that more frequent input. But then I think the key is numerous different avenues to obtain that. And one way now in the virtual environment is virtual town hall meetings that my vice presidents will have with students. But I would say the thing that has helped us the most, we know a lot of the challenges that our students face. They faced those same challenges pre-pandemic. There's no doubt those challenges are now more intensified. Absolutely, no doubt about that. But we implemented 4 disciplines of execution, 4DX, because what that did was put more staff members directly in touch with more students on a regular basis. And that's something we didn't have before. Before, the focus was, or in the lap, you might say, of student services and faculty. But now we have 90 4DX teams throughout the institution that are responsible for making weekly commitments and reporting on those weekly commitments and then making new commitments. That has helped with intensifying our services for student support more than anything else. It's great to see the kind of programs that you all are implementing at Greenville to kind of, again, better understand and connect to those experiences.
you bring up and both you and Dr. Elliott bring up the kind of student experience and the ways to understand it. Dr. Escamilla, you talked a little bit earlier in the panel about the community that you serve and how students were impacted, and Dr. Miller just talked about that. This whole series of events probably intensified already existing challenges that would exist. How are you all kind of continuing to learn and understand and capture the experiences of students and their anxiety and kind of response to that at Del Monte?
So a lot of the same ways, but I think the way that we've captured the most, I guess the clearest information that we've caught from has been through one-on-one conversations. And I too love the data. I am always carrying a stack of data with me, spreadsheets and so forth, statistical profiles and the like. But what we're learning from keeping our doors open to a degree and receiving students has been the most telling, because you'll find the repetitive refrains and consistencies and all those kinds of things from those types of conversations. Of course, we're also doing things with surveys and the like. We're really monitoring right now as we've been on-ramping more and more of 8-week section formats, scheduling formats for our classes. We're putting a lot of biofeedback measuring devices on that to assess where the students are going, to assess what types of students are benefiting from those kinds of classes as well. So some surveying and phone calls. I can't imagine. I'm waiting to get the full aggregated data, but what I do know is the number of phone calls that were made from employees who were working remotely and so forth was extraordinary. And that's that's a point that I'd like to make. In the summer, this past summer, we were expecting a lull in enrollment. We actually got an increase over the summer for enrollment, and we were picking up the phones and just kind of watching them in. We're sitting there saying, well, we always use summer as not but a predictor for fall enrollment, and when fall came in, first part of fall came in short, we were like, whoa, let's pick up the phone, let's start calling them again and start finding out who's not showing up and why, and particularly those groups that had signed up and had dropped for non-payment and or personal or other reasons. And so lots and lots of phone calls, lots and lots of data gathering that way, and note taking and the like. It's what we have to do. It's kind of like triaging the moment. We don't get to do longitudinal studies and all these kinds of things. You got to gather the data you have and make adjustments and so forth. So as we've done that, we knew that coming into this semester, the fall semester, that a traditional 16-week format was not going to serve us, based on what we'd been picking up and what we knew as in a declining economy, no less, with oil being what it is now, and in Texas, it has a profound effect in everything we do. Of course, it does nationwide, but Texas's economy is based on oil and gas as one of its primary pillars. And so with a slowdown there, we were thinking, well, they're all got to come back to work. But then there was another piece that we found out there when they were calling us and telling us, hey, well, we're getting this unemployment to support us and so forth, so we can ride this storm out. Add to that the complexity of the pandemic, and a hurricane or two that happened to sideswipe us and come our way. We've been dealing with storms, 25, 24 named storms in the Gulf, of which we have to watch on a regular basis. I know you do too on the East Coast. But it's been an incredible lesson in how you have to gather the information that you can when you can and use it. And that's where we've been for the past 6 months.
I think, as you point out, right, it's not just the pandemic. There's a tremendous number of, everything 2020. You can just watch the memes on social media or whatever, kind of see, right? It's a constant thing. And I love how you frame that it really is kind of creating conditions where you've got to operate from a respond and learn and react kind of methodology that I'm sure at times can be trying for you as leaders as well as for the teams who are working to support students in that process. I'm interested. And we can start with you, Dr. Escamilla, on this particular component. Last night, I was actually speaking with a group of students and asking a little bit about kind of their experiences in the pandemic and with their institution. And one of the things they highlighted to us was that they actually started to realize that some of the changes that were occurring of services or kind of interactions that they were having now through technology or remotely were actually more ideal for them in the long term. So they were actually starting to see elements of where kind of some of their behavior and technology was allowing them to shift. How do you envision students and staff interacting on a move forward basis with now being empowered maybe through different technologies?
Well, I think we're definitely, I just asked this question to our chief academic officer the other day, and I said, well, start gathering data, whatever that, to whatever means you can, to see which faculty we're going to shift, who are face-to-face, who are going to shift to one form or another of virtual learning, and or the opposite, and or whatever movement in any direction based on the scaling up of what we've had to do. So we're watching that very closely. And before we were at 22% of the sections were taught online at any given time. Obviously, right now is vastly greater and different. But I'm waiting to see when we get back to quote normal times what that percentage will actually look like, and we'll have the biofeedback measuring devices on that as well to check those. I think what the scaling up has done has forced upon us the situation such that we would have to actually it's testing a theory that we've long had in higher ed, and that is that our theory's always been it is imperative for our students, regardless of what side of the curriculum they're on, technical or transfer or whatever, even the short-term certificates, to take an online class. That's been the theory. We're always saying, take a class, because one day you're going to be forced to take a class, especially for those transfer students, those going off to the wonderful universities and taking on more years of instruction and education and so forth. And I've been saying, look, make yourself take an online class. Oh no, Dr. Mark, you can hear it in the community. I'd be at the grocery store telling, sharing this story with families and so forth. I said, well, we're afraid of the computer. No, you can't be afraid. You must embrace the computer, because that's going to get you through, especially if, Johnny or Susie is going to move on to university. Well, this pandemic has forced us to test that theory, and it's forced us to take on that role. Of course, it's got the implications for faculty and instruction, support services, and so forth, all the strains that are coming with scaling up. And it's proving out with those students as well. They're all being forced, if they're going to go to school, to take these classes if they're going to enroll in this particular semester. So I think that scaling up will have a profound effect both on the instructional support services side as well as the impact on the student themselves. They will find themselves in those scenarios where, like the students you were talking to, JD, they were saying, wow, this is okay, and this is great. And in fact, I live with one of those students. One of my 15-year-old son is a dual credit student with us here at Del Mar College. He's a junior at Flower Bluff High School here in Corpus Christi. He was just saying last night, as we were grilling some burgers on the porch last night, we were just talking. He says, Dad, I really like this. I'm a high school student. He goes, but I really feel like a college student with this schedule and the way things are online, the way I'm interacting, the freedoms and the lack of instruction that's going on. I really appreciate that. He was just saying that last night, and it's really good to have a little a guinea pig at the house with you.
Definitely. Dr. Miller, for you, you were talking about student engagement earlier and kind of the focal point that was for Greenville Tech. How do you see kind of the technology and student engagement evolving on a move forward basis?
Sure. I think we know that a 100% virtual course, the overriding challenge of that is whether or not the individual student has enough self-discipline to work through that course on their own, because that's really what it takes. So moving forward and looking into the not too distant future, actually looking at tomorrow, what do I think it takes to keep that student engaged in terms of what type of technological tool? I'm not sure what that tool is, but I know what it needs to do, and that is that tool needs to give the student on a regular interval competencies that they have obtained. So if they're in whether it's an 8-week course, because we do a number of those also, or 16-week course, that I think every 2 weeks or whatever that time interval is, we need a technological tool that will help us tell the student, you have attained these skills to this date. And think about what that does. If we can do that with ease, of course, in conjunction with the faculty member teaching the course, that gives that student some short-term goals as well as long-term goals. So it keeps them engaged. And if I wanted to take that a step further, with all the jobs available in the communities that I serve, I would link it to some of those jobs. So I'm a student sitting at my computer, and I can see that I'm into the course just 2 weeks, and I've attained 2 or 3 skills that are linked to a job at Michelin or a job at BMW. That more than anything, I think, will keep the students going and keep that discipline there and keep them engaged in the course. And that would be an ideal tool to have, and hopefully not just on the computer desktop, but as their cell phone as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's almost like you're adding a layer to kind of the guided pathway of a student through that process as well, not just what they need to do to get a credential, but also kind of what skills are they picking up along that same path. That's fascinating. Yeah, and it's really about taking. I mean, sometimes we talk about dissecting our programs to identify skills gained within those programs. I think it's deeper than that. I think we have to dissect each individual course for the student to keep them engaged. So rather than thinking about the student looking at, if I make it through this course, then I know I have to enroll into the next course. But we need shorter term goals for the students in addition to those long-term goals. Well, Dr. Elliott, I want to kind of turn to you, and then we'll hand it over for questions if any have come in through the audience. This has been a fantastic panel of discussion today. As you think about how technology can support you and where you all are as an institution, what are some of the kind of supports that you could see really enhancing your institutional or kind of student success?
To Dr. Miller's point, Futures Inc. is actually working on precisely what Dr. Miller was talking about, connecting the learning with credentials, with skills and hiring. We're actually working on a project with them on that for the construction industry prior to COVID hitting, but we're going to continue that project. I also think technology, we're learning more and more. Technology has helped us look at our student experience differently. And I'll give you an example. For example, Blackboard is now releasing free data on student activity, how often students are logging on, how much time they're spending onto the LMS platform. And that's not something that we really had before, and it would be really remiss of us if we didn't take that information and use it, whether we use it from predictive analytics aspect, or course improvement, instructional improvement, modality improvement. So we have the opportunity to take some data that has been made available to us because of the pandemic. It's free now, but we'll see if that continues. But if we don't use that opportunity to use that data to inform the student experience and how we can improve as an institution, I think it's a huge missed opportunity. Also, you know, we realize that technology, while it enhances our lives and we have been able to operate as an institution, we use Teams meetings a lot. There have been instances where technology has been a hindrance. For example, nursing students need to take the HESI. And if you want that technology, it has to be done in person and proctoring exams. I think that we learned that while it's great to have the technology, sometimes the technology isn't keeping up with what our needs might be. I shared the example earlier with Chromebook and Respondus, which is a testing proctoring site. They don't work. They're not compatible. So we've had, while the technology's there, I think we have to frame some conversations around the compatibility, but also how are we going to use it in a meaningful way. I mean, iPad's data is great, but it doesn't really tell me how to improve the student experience. And as I talked earlier about the qualitative data, but also the Blackboard data, and how can we use that for predictive analytics. So, and moving forward, regardless of a pandemic, and helping our students with also improving student learning. And I'm not no technology expert, but I do know that I've been using it a lot the last 6 months.
As many of us have, and you know, I think what your statement on earlier, right, that technology can be a blessing and a curse all at the same time. As we it didn't always think of every use case either, right? And those mechanisms, there's a lot of responding both ways in that process. So thank you all. I want to turn over now and see if there happen to be any questions that were submitted, and we have a few minutes to be able to ask those.
JD, I'm not seeing any questions come in, so everyone please feel free. You can ask questions, entering them in the Q&A in the bottom there. But,
we'll give it just a second.
Right. Yeah, give it a second. Looks like we do have one. Do you find students are utilizing engagement? Wait, hang on. Sorry, I gotta roll this down. Engagement tools, for example, we have used curriculum in a way to help students connect with students in their classes outside of the classroom, and the students simply are not interested in another virtual platform. So, do you find the students are engaging? Does anyone have an answer?
I'll start with that. I am meeting one-on-one with any employee that wants to during this time, and I have met with a couple faculty members. And I can only take their feedback. What they've shared with me is that they felt that students have been engaging on the platform. I think what aids to that is the opportunity for the virtual meetings, where it's not just not just a static online class, but the students can see the faculty member. But I'm not in the classroom, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. We have been doing continuing student activities virtually, and that engagement seems to be pretty well responded to by students early on and in the semester, and probably a little bit maybe before they got into their classes. One thing I think we are seeing is that students that are, and I have a child that really struggles with the virtual format and how it was laid out. And when I talked to my son, he said, well, Mom, in high school, they teach all this stuff to me, and then I go home and do my assignments. Well, right now, I just start out wanting to do my assignment because that's what I'm used to doing at home. And he wasn't really taking the time to watch do the PowerPoints or watch the video. And so for me, that became a disconnect on how was he engaged. Well, his mindset was, I've got to do these assignments, and rather than actually going through the learning portion of the course. And so I think that's a very good question, and I've done a horrible job answering it. So I'm going to hand it over to maybe one of my colleagues.
No, I think engagement, Jackie. I think you said it well. The engagement level is certainly there. You know, these are most of the students, even with the gaps in access to technology and so forth, considered. The majority of our students are digital natives to some degree, to a greater degree than a generation before, for sure. And so I think as such, there's a natural attraction to all that's going on. You know, anytime they learn a new app, again, let me qualify. I learned this from my guinea pigs at home. You learn that anytime there's a new apparatus, anytime there's a new methodology and so forth, it entices them. They do come along. That's kind of just their nature to be attracted to the changing tides, if you will, in technology. I'd like to go back, if I may, JD, really quickly. I've got to tell you, you were talking about technology and the impact and how it's changing things. We're the first, and this is just strictly on the end user, we're the first college in Texas to go entirely with Anthology. Okay, we're at that forefront of that discussion in Texas, and we've been going through a total ERP conversion that's just begun this calendar year, and we expect to be done next year this time. The advantages, though, that I like about this opportunity and that I'm finding them to be very responsive on is that, you know, we're starting off with our customer relations manual management system, and so that CRM module rather is about reaching out and engaging people. And that's because that was kind of the lowest hanging fruit. But the part that I like about this whole conversion, even more than that, is that we're beginning with students. We're talking about the data and the profiles. And Jackie, you said this, you know, iPads and in Texas, CBM reports, you know, the state reporting this and the federal reporting are really limiting with regard to how you can set up this program, what you can actually do with them. And all too often people take them and actually beat us over the head with these data that have to do with a 500 student cohort. It's ridiculous. But what I like about this conversion right now is that on the front end, we're having these conversations with the Anthology teams to define the experiences of all of our students, whether you're on the credit side or the continuing education side. Every one of those matter. When we're dealing with, you know, when we're sitting here and able to, you know, when you ask me, how big is the college? Well, we'll go back to the traditional data, and I'll tell you, you know, it's up to 12,000 students, usually about 11,000, somewhere between 11 and 12,000 on a given fall. We don't talk about the full spectrum of the students. And the full spectrum of the students, we really, and we value all learners equally here at Del Mar, and our ERP has got to reflect that. That's what I like about Anthology. They're taking all that into consideration so that we can track and monitor what all of our students are doing. And I'll just tell you what, that is a breath of fresh air. We were talking about, you know, the fact that we serve somewhere closer to 22 to up to 25,000 individual students throughout the curriculum. And we have a very strong continuing education division here at the college. And that's important with things like this. I just had to add that. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you. And you know, I think that that is important, as you were both talking, and that there's a lot of things that are kind of transpiring there that you're beginning to wrap in, so that you can you know, continue to adapt and evolve kind of the process of working with those students and keeping them engaged, especially as, again, technology is going through lots of shifts, and students themselves can be inundated and overwhelmed, as well as our faculty and staff and the kind of supports. I know we're coming up on our time. There are more questions that were asked that I wish we could get to. I feel like we could do a whole nother hour on just the questions that have come in. But I just want to say thank you to each of you and to your teams who are doing amazing work during these trying times to help support students, which I know you do all the time. but I know right now it can be even more trying through those circumstances. Thank you for your leadership to your institutions, and thank you for the work that you're doing to help educate and lead during these times. We really appreciate those efforts and the efforts of your staff, your faculty, and your students who are committed to continuing to learn. It's an amazing thing to hear your experiences and also be able to support you in those processes.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate the opportunity to share with my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
And Steve, do we want to turn it back over to you?
Yes, great. Well, again, thank you to you and to all of our panelists here who led this, really inspiring discussion, for your time and expertise. We appreciate it, and our audience especially. And I would just also like to thank our attendees for joining us today. This and every other web seminar like this are provided by University Business, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, as well as trends and current issues in higher education. Our wide range of readers, they do subscribe for free to University Business and stay up to date with us through our print magazine, the digital edition, our newsletters, and our web seminars like this one. Also, for those of you who would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that the solutions that our panelists provided in this web seminar would be really useful to your colleagues, you will be pleased to know that there will be an archive recording of this web seminar that will be available at the URL that's provided on your screen right now. You can also expect to receive an email from our team here at UB today, which will include a link to all of the slides. So with that, on behalf of University Business, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone, and have a great school year. Take care.